Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Republic We Keep.
Religious organizations have long been since a cornerstone of local community life, a place of worship, but also a place of service. And for many, partnering with local organizations like Habitat for Humanity offers a way to put faith into action, helping build homes, hope, and stronger neighborhoods.
Our guest, Dick Carr, spent his career in technical and business leadership at Bell Labs, and now channels his time and energy into volunteer work, including Habitat for Humanity and Feeding Hands. We're here to hear his story and learn about the impact of faith-based service. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thanks a lot. So let's start out with question one, and that is, tell a little about my background and how did I get involved in volunteer work. So I grew up in northwestern Ohio in a little rural farming community, Norman Rockwell kind of community, rural kind of community. And I got some really good gifts in life. So at that point, when I was like a grade school child, I took things apart and put them together. And later, I got into electronics, and I built all kinds of radios and fixed people's TVs and did all of that. I was good at tuning up their cars. I was good at working with mechanical things and that kind of stuff. And I wrote award-winning essays on a lot of subjects like democracy and socialism and stuff like that when I was like 13 years old.
Wow, that's
and
awesome.
One summer I was bored. My father was a math professor at a small engineering school, and my mother an interior decorator. So I was bored out of my mind when I was 14 in this rural town. And so he during the summertime, he gave me 3 hours on Tuesday and 3 hours on Thursday on the computer. Computers were very rare and at that point and very expensive, and so the engineering department had a computer. And so he gave me personal time. He gave me some computer manuals, a programming manual, and a book on numerical solution to partial differential equations. I picked them up, I read them, they all made sense, and I wrote a bunch of software that simulated different gravity and particles moving in gravity. So that was at age 14. So that was good. I had some good gifts going for me. And that eventually led to having a career in Bell Labs, which is a research and development part of AT&T. So that was all good stuff.
So I want to hear all about your work at Bell Labs. What did you do?
So let me I can give you the basic. So I came in, got a degree in physics and then in computer science after that. And one of the first degrees in computer science from Northwestern that they ever issued, because it was in the math department before that. And it was just fortuitous what happened to me, because that was just at the moment in time when we were starting to use computers to operate the telephone network. Everything before that had been mechanical, because mechanical was reliable and mechanical would go through all kinds of environmental and all kinds of stuff. But computers were relatively fragile at that point and not that reliable. And the phone network had very, very high reliability requirements. For the equipment I worked on, no more than 2 hours of failure in 40 years was the standard we had to meet with computer equipment. And so I worked on equipment, computer control for the network that was self-recovery, self-diagnosing, and so if it failed within a millisecond, it would keep going, and all the calls would still keep working, and there'd be a message sent to a remote maintenance center, and someone could come out and fix it. And that was not just for hardware; that was for software errors and human errors. So high reliability, high availability computing for the phone network. So I did that for a while as an engineer. And then I went into management and was in a really complex environment. We were doing big projects, like $1 million a day if we slept the project. So and a lot of 4,000 people involved in this thing.
Wow.
And so I kind of learned the skills of team building and trust. And so I built high-performance engineering teams of people that were super motivated and got all these things done in a chaotic environment. And so if I were to look back at that period in time and say from a legacy point of view, what am I really proud of? What do I really think has, that was a while aside, some perspective back in time. It's not the technology. Technology is all dead and gone. Technology goes like that. But probably there's 1,000 people I worked with over those period in my career that I coached and trained about human relationships and about teamwork and about coaching and training other people so that they could perform and work together. And that's what I think that's a legacy that I left of all of those people that were able to now go out in corporate life and then maybe like I did in volunteer life and reuse all of those same relationship skills and organization and planning skills to do God's work in addition to doing the corporate.
That's awesome. I would love to hear more about how you transitioned into your volunteer work. Were you always involved, or did you kind of start recently?
Well, actually, I wrote down 27 and 54 on my piece of paper. So at 27, I got married later in life. So at 27, I got married. And my wife's parents lived in a small suburb of Pittsburgh. And unlike my parents, they were super involved in their community. My father owned a landscaping business and my mother-in-law was a homemaker. But they founded Meals on Wheels to take meals to needy families. They went out and they helped just many individual people in many different ways. Somebody had lost their job or somebody had some problem in life. They would be out there and they would help them. So I started spending time with them. They were very gracious. They adopted me as a son, adopted me and loved me and adopted me into their family, and that was really wonderful. But then I started spending time going out on these calls. I remember the first one I went on was a 90-year-old veteran, and we went up in my father-in-law's 4x4 up this hollow to where this guy was in this old shack kind of house, and with a meal, a hot meal. And we took him the meal, and of course it wasn't just giving him the meal. We had a long conversation with the gentleman, and I was blown away. I'd never seen that you could provide care and love and concern for someone that wasn't a family member or that wasn't somebody that were paying you, right? So I spent a lot of time with them, and I started serving other people, and I then went back and got involved in my church and got involved in serving other people. So my faith in God and my serving others, it kind of started by serving people and spending time with my in-laws. So that was one point. And then there's 54. That's 27. 54 is a different story. When I was 54, I retired. I had worked for Bell Labs, and then it spun off into Lucent Technologies. And Lucent had kind of gone sideways a little bit business-wise. And they gave me an enhanced retirement, what we used to call the golden handshake. So enhanced more money to go out and retire early. So I retired at 54, and my wife retired at 50. And I had saved and invested. This is a few people ever get this opportunity. I'd saved and invested enough resources that I could do anything I wanted with the rest of my life. Complete open book. So I had a choice. What am I going to do? Am I going to piddle around and play games or piddle around and do stuff, or am I going to serve? And at that point, from 27 to 54, a little more mature faith and a little more trust. And I said, I'm going to serve other people. That's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to serve and be faithful. And just as I retired, there was a person in our church that was a COO of a company, but he was also an excellent carpenter. And he volunteered at Habitat, asked me to come out, and I started working with the Habitat crew. And wow, I got totally involved. And that's a very emotional, it's just like feeding hands, in that it's a very emotional thing. When you build a house for someone that's been homeless or that's been in living in really horrible circumstances, you transform their whole life. I mean, it's just astounding. I had a woman that when we did the dedication, I sometimes handed the keys, because at that point I was also president of the board of that too, so I handed them the keys when we dedicated the house. So I would sometimes cry when I handed them the keys, because I just had a somewhat of an idea what it meant to them. So this woman said, my daughters can play outside. I said, what does that mean? I mean, I grew up in a rural area. I had a 15-mile radius. Play outside. She said she lived in one of these communities in New Jersey that was a really poor community, and there was drug dealing and gunfire, from time to time. And her children were the three of them living in a one-bedroom apartment, paying at that time $1,800 a month, and this is a long time ago, exorbitant amount of money. And so anytime those children left the apartment, she had to hold on to both of them. They went into the car, they went away, they came out of the car, and they never were allowed to be outdoors.
Wow.
I mean, that was shocking to me, right? What would you grow up like that and you can't go outdoors because there's gunfire? So after we followed up, one of the advantages of Habitat is we stay connected to the families going forwards. So you ask them a year or two later, and it's dramatic. The children are doing dramatically better. They're not being bounced, because these horrible places they live, they get bounced out from time to time. The landlord would bounce them out or raise the rent, and they couldn't afford it. So they just got shuttled all over the place. They could go to school and consistently, and they had a stable home environment. They had hope for a better future. And some of them went to college. They'd make a little garden outside because they had a yard. I mean, it was just totally transformative. So to me, the emotional part of it, for all of us volunteers that worked on this, the emotional part is that how many times do you get a chance to really do something you know is good, right from your heart, totally good, and something that'll change someone else's life in a dramatic way? There's very few opportunities for that, and we had the gift of being able to do that. So I probably worked on 50 homes for 50 families over that period of time.
Wow.
And the other part that's kind of interesting is if you went to our job site, you'd see air compressor, a nail gun, a chop saw, a level, a laser line, and all this kind of stuff. It's the same stuff that a commercial builder would have if they were building a house. The difference is all of us who were there using those tools knew we were changing somebody's life. So for us, it was an emotional experience, very different from just contracting to put a house up. And then, of course, we became very close, all of us too, and went through some marriages and divorces and health problems and all that because and we worked, I should add this, we worked 2 days, Wednesday, Thursday, 12 months a year. We were there in the summer and in the winter and building houses for these families. And you could say we had days when it was cold or days it was uncomfortable. I was putting duct work in so that we could do the drywall and meet the schedule so the family could get into the house. And it was near zero, and I was putting some duct together. I had to use my bare hands. And I was in real pain doing that.
I can imagine.
And I'll tell you, I was joyous because I knew that family was going to have a home that was going to be warm and safe. And I, despite working with those pipes at near 0 degrees, the pipes to get the ductwork in, I knew I was doing something really important. So we were really a committed team and really part of that. And so I was on the board for that for a while, and we went through a lot of transformations, organizational transformations as we grew and as things changed, and went through various crises on the board. But I reused the same skills that I had when I was the Bell Lab skills that I had, because I built a high-performance team. It was sometimes chaotic. We had teamwork and trust, and we had a set of kind of principles, and we rewarded people. We had social events together and got to know each other and entwined in each other's life, and become really a unified team. So that's kind of the story of Habitat. And I did it for 22 years. And then after 22 years, I left as a friend. That's just a few years ago. Because at that point, the board had really been revamped, and they got an executive director who was really good. And they got a bunch of money, so that's great. They were doing a lot more than we were able to do. But then it wasn't just this little core team anymore holding it all together. They brought in some professional contractors, and they brought in a lot of other people, worked other days of the week, and so the team kind of got dispersed. And so I said, after 22 years, I'm ready for something new. So that's how that happened. So that's the story of Habitat. Interesting people that you ask about, interesting people. Well, what an eclectic set of people we had. And you think this is a mostly white-collar professional kind of area. So the education and the experiences of these people were something. I had a PhD mechanical engineer, and he was a star. He and I were very good friends. We needed to lift things up to the roof when we built a crane to lift it up because he's a mechanical engineer. That's what they do. And he had a body shop in his house and fixed BMWs on the side. He had all kinds of stuff that he did. So we had a guy in his 70s that was a champion skydiver. And this guy would jump out of plane. Where you have a formation of 100 people hold hands and make a formation. He was part of a world team and flew off all over the world to skydive. So that was interesting. Another person we had that was very interesting is he was Japanese, and his family in World War II. We interred Japanese families during the war. Something maybe not the thing we're the proudest of in the long run. So his family lost their farm and they were interred. He got shipped, somehow he got to New Jersey. I don't know if he got shipped to New Jersey or if he got here. He got a medical degree. He was an anesthesiologist. He retired as an anesthesiologist. He was part of our work team. And wow. He was the when we had this reward, who's the most helpful person to work with? Who do people like to work with? We had all these little awards for things. He was always the top of the people like to work with him. He was very precise and he was very easy to work with. And the thing that really, he was a role model for me because 2 weeks before he passed away, he was hanging a door. So this was a very strong, to serve was a very strong commitment in his life. And he never worried about his he had medical things going on. He never discussed that or complained about that. He just said, we're going to build this house. So all kinds of people that were in there that were from all different walks of life that were part of that team, that were integrated, and we all shared the common goal and common purpose.
How do you think Habitats for Humanity, being a faith-based organization, played into it, and how did your faith play into it as well?
So it played into my faith because I had committed myself to serving others, and so Habitat for Humanity allowed me to have the opportunity to serve others in a very direct and visible way. Mm-hmm. So that was true. As far as being a religious organization, yes, it was, but we were ecumenical in this sense across all faiths. But we also had people that were not believers too. So we were Christian at some level, but in families there was no attempt to. We had Muslim families, we had Christian families, we had non-believer families, we had all kinds of families. So we didn't really discriminate because of that. But on the other hand, we did pray for guidance and for help when we worked on things. And we didn't hide the fact that we were a religious organization. We were open about it, but we didn't make that the primary point of pushing people out or saying they couldn't be part of it. And so we worked through all of that and found a reasonable compromise. So that's how we handled that.
I just have to ask, because I'm studying engineering, how did faith play in with that? I know a lot of people, particularly in science area, tend to be hesitant when it comes to believing. How do you feel about that?
Well, that was a huge struggle for me. That was huge. That was a 20-year struggle, because absolutely when I was younger, there's the rational, there's empirical, there's data, and then there's this is all superstitious. And I was very dismissive. I mean, people of faith, it's for weak people that can't manage their life. And it's probably better than alcohol or drugs.
What did Marx say about religion? That religion's the opium of
the right, exactly. Opium of the masses.
I think a lot of people in the sciences have that view.
But as I got involved with my in-laws and as I started serving, that was one element. But there was another really important element too in my life, and that is purpose in my life and my identity became really important as I got older. And And just to be dramatic about it, so what are we going to put? And I mean, I lived a fairly nice life. I mean, I had my red sports car. I had a whole bunch of power boats. I had summer homes. I did all of this stuff, right? That an upper middle class person that was a successful engineer would do. But I reached a realization near the 27 or some 27 to 30. I reached a realization: is this all there is? What are we going to put on my tombstone? He owned a red sports car. That was who he was. I said, no, that's not me. There's more important things. So then I became much more serious about my faith and about learning and adopting faith into my life, so it was part of my life. So it's a question of what is my purpose in life. So I'll jump to something. I've thought a lot about and you'll see that in the document I gave you. What is the purpose of faith in my life? What does it do for me? Why do I do that? I've asked those questions, and here's what now you have to apologize. I'm an engineer, so it's the letters H, D, P plus J, I is what faith means to me. H is hope. I know that I'm looking for at the end of my life to get the pat on my shoulder, that you ran the good race and you did this, welcome. So that's hope. And D is dignity. I know that I was created in the image of God, and I know that I'm a loved child of God. No matter what you do to me or tell me or show me or what happens to me, I know that I am a person that has dignity. The P is the one that really, I have purpose. There's a purpose in my life, and that purpose is to be faithful to God and to serve others. And so this purpose, and you notice I left the plus JI at the end.
I was wondering what's the
yes.
J?
Well, so you think about an INTJ. Where would emotion be the first thing they would deal with? Not really. No. So plus joy and inspiration. So I really live life today. And I think this is just for people that don't understand faith. I see the world in a different way as a believer. And I see a world where I know God's in charge. I know things will be made right. I don't worry about the news. I don't sit there and extrapolate, what if this, what if that. I don't worry about the news. I know what my role is, to serve other people and do what I need to do. I get up every morning and I'm joyous. All the gifts I've been given, I'm going to have an opportunity. Today, I fed 94 families. So, I mean, I have every day I think about that. So I can live in a world that's broken and messed up, and I can live with joy every day of my life. And I did that in my working life. When you look at the rules for how I managed my career, every job I took, I wanted it something I was going to enjoy, I was going to learn something new, and I was going to have a way to impact people, an opportunity to impact people. And I was able to do that for 32 years, every year after year. So how many people get that? So I really feel that I've had but faith is really part of having a premium life, if you will, to be crude about it, and society, our marketing wise about it. So service is just part of that. So,
do you feel it ever contradicted your work?
No. What happened to me is in my working life, there was you'll see that in one of the stages there. There's a transformation at one point where I determined that, and this was a revelation. All these are little revelations. I had a revelation that I used to think that being faithful and being religious was something you did on Sunday if you're a Christian, or Saturday, whatever, and you, or when I was serving somebody. But then I was working, and that was something different. At some point, I don't remember how I came to this revelation. I can be a Christian all the time, 24/7, in my work and everywhere. And so people started coming to me at work to talk to me. It just felt they could come to me. I was a person they could talk to. Sometimes a work problem, sometimes an engineering problem, but sometimes a personal problem. So I started being a person that people could come to and trust. So I started serving in that role and it certainly changed my work, because it changed my ability to work with other people. Because if I was in a conflict with you over something, over budget or over some engineering problem we had or something, I might have, in my earlier me, the older me, might have said, we don't agree because you're just trying to jam the conversation. You're just trying to be obstinate and try. In my later thing, after some management training, Myers-Briggs, and as a Christian, I would say, well, you're a human being. You have feelings that are involved in this. I need to figure out what those are and see how I can respect you and respect your feelings, and how can we come to a new place together on this engineering problem or whatever we're working on. So being a believer really changed my ability to be a manager too, because there's a lot of attributes you learn from faith, and if you're Christian, it's fruits of the Spirit, things like humility and forbearance and faithfulness and things like that. So bring those to the work side, and wow. So
I think that's a super profound idea, and I think especially in things like civic engagement and politics, understanding other people's beliefs, that's even more important.
Right.
To get to hear other point of view and understand why people might feel that way.
So today when I meet somebody new, people are really complex.
Yeah.
You have more synapses in your brain than there are stars in the known universe. Humans are incredibly complex. And so if I meet somebody now in my today's condition, I won't say I've achieved perfection yet, but every year I'm getting better. That's another attribute, get better every year. But I would say that I wouldn't label you in first meeting you as being red or blue or orange or old or young or whatever, or gender or whatever. I would say you're a human being. I was always intensely curious about mechanical and electrical things, and I still am. How does it work? And that's why when I was a child I took things apart. But I also later became intensely interested in human beings. Like, what makes you tick? What do you think about? How do you think? You probably think different than me. Your thought pattern's different. And then what kind of upbringing a little psychology maybe, what kind of upbringing got you to that point? So an application of that, sorry if I'm jumping on you, but I'm a Stephen minister now. So Stephen ministers are people that are trained and have a support network, and we're there for people that are having difficulty in their life. They've had a loss of a child, a loss of a spouse, a loss of a job, they've been injured. So I'm part of a team, and we have clients referred to us, and then we work with them. And so it's the same process. Somebody new comes to me, I'm going to walk with them and figure out, totally open, no judgment, walk with them in their life, figure out where they're at, listen to them, and then ask questions so they can start to explore where they're at and where they need to go. So the same principle of open mind and working with someone and appreciating their humanity works in counseling them as well as solving engineering problems. They both work the same.
So I just want to ask a little bit more about the church's role in community. Do you think that churches today are doing enough to meet the needs of their surrounding communities?
Well, I read that question and I thought about it some.
I think religious organizations in general, not specifically just churches, but...
Yeah, religious organizations, communities of faith.
Yeah,
communities of faith is what I would say. I'd give them a B maybe, or a B minus maybe, because there certainly are a lot of things. I'll take my church that I'm involved in. We have a mission in Honduras we run for 20 years. We built a school, and we've all these children have and a medical clinic, and for La Entrada, Honduras, we've changed the lives of La Entrada. And in Malawi, we're partnered with somebody else, and we have solar lighting so they have at night, and we have irrigation, solar pumps so they can have irrigation and things like that, books and libraries and education for them. So those things our church has been more involved in international, but in local mission, it's kind of, I'd give it a C or a D. In local mission, this feeding hands that I brought into the church, this was an important thing for them to have a local opportunity to do local mission as far as the institution of the church. So many churches could do more locally, I think, in their local community. And it's not as exotic and it's this and that of doing some foreign country, but it's the mission field, it's right there next door to your church. I mean, so I think that would be an important thing. But the other thing I would say is, if you look, 2 more points. If you look at Habitat for Humanity or Feeding Hands or many of these organizations that are nonprofit organizations that are doing serving social needs in the community, a high percentage of the volunteers have religious faith background. They self-select. I'm not all alone here. There's a lot of people like me that feel the need to serve their community, and you mentioned that the same thing for you too. And so the churches are, when we started Habitat at the beginning, I was near the beginning with the founder. Churches did a lot financially, supported a lot of the finances. Later, we have corporate and foundations and donors. But if you look at Habitat or Feeding Hands or anything like that, 90% of the volunteers are from a faith tradition. So they really are out in the community, but maybe not as the church. They're out in the community working in other nonprofit organizations to make things happen. Second point, where churches have impact. I've done disaster relief. So I went after Katrina. I made a couple trips down to Louisiana and did mucked out houses and tore out drywall that was rotted and moldy and all this kind of stuff. And with Sandy, when we had Superstore Sandy in Monmouth County, I did demolition and clean out. When you look at disasters, almost all of the people on the ground in disaster are faith-based. People say, did FEMA do this? Did FEMA? Well, maybe FEMA did something, but we were being fed the tools. The place we slept in, when we were doing demolition, were all faith-based. So faith-based organizations, people don't realize that, but faith-based organizations have a huge role in disaster relief. So that's another place of going out and serving and serving your fellow man.
So I have a quote here from George Washington's farewell address. He said, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports."
Right.
Do you feel that religion is necessary for political prosperity?
Absolutely. And I would say that if I think of for me, that list I wrote of rules of life, I started looking through that. A lot of things have changed in my life as my faith grew and as I got involved in more volunteer things. But I have core values that I have consistently maintained since I was a teenager. Things that I believe are right and wrong, and things that I believe are should and should not do. And those core values are really critical to me. They're being faith has reinforced them, yeah. But those core values are there. And I think to have a civil society, people have to have core values of integrity and of morality. And you can't have enough police to police everything that everybody does. A society can become a very vicious place. Society can become a very destructive place unless you have, a lot of the citizens have core values that they bring to the table every day and in their everyday life and dealing with other people.
Do you think there's any other ways to get those core values beside religion?
No, that's really the source. That's the source. All these experiments to try to figure out all the isms, all the experiments to try to figure out. And the reason, I have a theory of why that's true.
I would love to hear.
Because I've thought about that too for a long time. If you were going to design a new airplane, design a 747 airplane, or electrical, you're going to design a TV transmitter or anything like that, or a cell phone. Would you start over with a clean sheet of paper, like discovery of electrons and discovery of stuff? You build on all of there's since the Renaissance, there's 500 years of experience you're going to build on. practice and theory, then practice experience, right? All this electrical engineering didn't come from nowhere, right? I mean, so that's the distillation of all that practical experience, starting with discovery of radio waves only 120 years ago. So if I look at what does it take to make a working society with human beings that work and work well, let's say from the Renaissance, prior to the Renaissance, let's say there's 1,000 years of experience, and the Catholic Church was an important part of that 1,000 years of experience of human beings. How do they live together? And that it really was evolution. Learning how what kind of rules work, how tight do they need to be, what do you need to police, what is a society supposed to have responsible for versus what do you leave loose and goes every direction in society. So I think it's practice and experience got us to where we are. And English law is an example of that. That's an important thing. And many things in English law, like the grand jury and like a process and the trial process, they tried everything else, and it didn't work very well. So you have 1,000 years of practice and experience that got us to this democratic society we have and the rule of law, and so thinking you're going to start over again would be like designing a cell phone and let's discover how electricity works. It doesn't work that way. That's my theory. Mm-hmm. I think that we have tremendous body of experience of how humans ought to work together. And I'm warming up to natural law. I was not very hot about natural law, but I am warming up to natural law. I'm believing that now that there's more to that we have an innate sense of what's right or wrong and what's moral.
Well, I think that's what opponents would argue, is that we do have an innate sense, so why do we need religion? Why do we need all these different dogmas that are potentially blinding to empirical analysis?
So I've thought about that too. I think on religion, if you said faith, so I could say if you look at what it takes to be a good person, being moral and being a good person, here's what I would say, good or bad. I would say that you can say, all right, I'm not going to be religious, I'm not going to have a faith tradition, and I'm going to be a good person. Okay, that's fine. But what my experience would say, that this society we live in, you are exposed 24/7 to the society. Success is money. Success is sex. It's power. It's the corner office. It's whatever. It's approval of other people. I want more likes than you do. I mean, all those kind of things. That's pervasive. You're immersed in that 24/7. I think if you don't have a faith, you say, I'm going to be a good person. I think if you don't have a faith tradition, you will quickly succumb. You don't have, not part of a community, you'll quickly fail. It'd be like walking through a swamp full of alligators. Yes, it's possible you might make it to the other side, but it's not very likely. And the other important parts about religion is when you do fail, you can ask for forgiveness and receive forgiveness, and you can learn from that and move on. So I have never gone back when I failed. I've never gone back and agonized about it. I ask for forgiveness. I say it's a lesson I learned. I'm going to try to improve as a human being and get beyond it. Sometimes it takes a few cycles, but I'm going to get beyond that and move on. What if you didn't have that mechanism? You didn't ever have a corrective mechanism that lets you get back in tune with what is good and what is good in life, and you just keep drifting to the response to what society has. So it provides a powerful corrective mechanism. And you, by living in community, an important part of faith community is community, that you're living in a community with others, and so other people are going through the same thing, and you support each other and are helpful to each other and pray for each other and offer encouragement to each other. So living in a community, I can't imagine. We see this when we're the Stephen ministers. People come and their life has crashed for some reason, and they come to us and they have no faith tradition. They're in trouble. They're in deep water and they can't swim. So I as I've gone along in life, I've become more and more convinced that faith tradition is super important in being successful, in living the good life, if you will, to make a TV movie out of it. I mean, it's
eudaimonia.
Yeah, right.
So I took ethics honors here at RV. It was an amazing class. I learned so much. And we got to play around with what does it mean to be good and why are people good. So we got to learn about all these different philosophers and their 2 cents. And we came across a few. One of them is Mill, and he had he was a consequentialist, and he pretty much, his whole thing was that every action is for a consequence. So if I'm mean to somebody, that person's going to be mean to me, therefore I should not be mean. Or like, but it's more of like for pleasure, meaning like, why do I go to school? Well, this was also Aristotle. Why do I go to school? I go to school because I want my degree, and I want my degree because I need a job, and I need a job because I will
support my family,
and I need to support my family because that makes me happy, and it's my family. So I'm everything. It's like, I think it's a little bit of like a selfish way
Very mercantilist view of it.
Yes, but
transactional.
Aristotle not so much, because he just believed in the idea of like eudaimonia and every action going towards like achieving eudaimonia, which is like this perfect state of like
virtue and happiness.
No, well,
not necessarily happiness, but
yeah, it's like the good life.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But Mill was more of like, had more emphasis on the pleasure principle, which was like so this is something that I like very, very much disagreed with, which is like, there is good pleasures. Well, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but there's all these, so everything that you do is to either feel pleasure or not pain. So, for example, there's also different types of pleasures. There's higher pleasures and low pleasures. And then the high pleasures is like reading. And then the low pleasures is like sex or like eating food that tastes good.
Yeah, right.
So, but he said that essentially all pleasures are good, and that the smart people will prefer the higher pleasures over the lower pleasures. But either way, they're all good. And I mean, I personally disagreed with that, and he was a philosopher that didn't really like stick with me. But it was interesting hearing about other people's perspective on this, especially because I grew up very, very differently than like to have a mindset like that. So it was really interesting, and I think it challenged a lot of my beliefs and made me overall like stand stronger in what I think. Yeah, and you got to read him too, because I obviously had told him all about it.
Well, in my study group, we took the courageous step of reading St. Augustine. And he talks about the better goods and the lesser goods. And it's exactly the same principle that St. Augustine.
Wow.
Yeah, I think another interesting philosophy that you talked about was Kant's categorical imperative, which is basically the golden rule. Don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you, which I thought was interesting, but it emphasized taking away the religious aspect of it and relying on reason to come to what means good to others.
I don't remember exactly what Kant's like background was, but I know he was Jewish, and then his family had converted like Catholicism. I don't know exactly, but I don't know if he was very religious, but yeah. So his categorical imperative, have you heard of it?
No.
It's like a very,
that part of philosophy.
As somebody in like humanities, this is like very like mathy to me, and this is like the part where like it's like philosophy becomes very logical. But he's
logic and philosophy are close.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're cousins.
Yeah. So pretty much, so his test was like, what is? Oh my God, this is like last semester, but. Like, what's the premise of this water bottle is yours, right? And if I were to take it from you, it would no longer be yours. Wait, I'm messing it up. Help me.
If everyone were to do that, then there would be no water bottles left.
Yeah.
There would be no possession. Okay, wait. So let me rephrase that. So if I were to take your things, What do you need to have something taken from you? You need ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So if everyone took everyone's things, there would be no ownership, and that would be a contradiction. Therefore, it can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much his test, and it takes the whole like God and like goodness out of it. It was just like, this can't work
Just
if everybody does
reason.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is, in my thinking about this, is that having a loving God, and a loving God that was a creator, and that has for example, I believe there's a plan for my life. And I believe that plan was from the time that plan has existed. And when I was an atheist, I had lots of experiences. And I've come to not regret those experiences. I've come to understand that those are experiences that partly made me who I am, prepared me to be who I am as a faithful Christian. So I think God had a plan for me, and that plan was not always to be, the plan was to have a period where I was off the ranch for a while before, and those were formative experiences. So if you believe in a loving God, and you will believe that those experiences can be redeemed, even though you think they were bad experiences, they can be redeemed to be part of your character when you go forward. And so all of this relational stuff about the golden rule, if you take a loving God out of that, I think then, and the source of my purpose in my life, you've subtracted something important from me. That's why I'm a believer.
So what are some of the biggest challenges in volunteer work, either personally or seeing how projects are run?
I would say that what I've seen a lot of, many people who do volunteer work are idealistic. They have something in mind, something, I want to feed the poor, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, or alleviate pain, or whatever, however I want to help people, shelter the homeless, or whatever. This is an odd thing. So that's fine, that's good. But what happens is when you get to execution is not very good. So they don't end up achieving really success in the goal they wanted to have, because I've kind of integrated into mind being idealistic and being hopeful and being a Christian, but also I'm a really good engineer and project planner and execution, because that's why I got paid a lot of money to execute on all these products we build and everything else. But people that are idealistic sometimes don't have any experience of there isn't an appreciation on their part of that execution is what makes it work. You need a project plan, you need a budget, people need delegated responsibilities, you need to have goals, you need to have an original purpose of what this project you are doing is. That's a tested problem statement, if you will, if you're engineering wise, that you're working on. Boundary conditions, you need to know what the boundary conditions are. So an engineering mindset applied to a humanitarian purpose is the best of all. So that's lacking in many cases, because the people that do that don't have that experience and background, and the people that have the experience and background
don't have the idealism.
Aren't involved in that. So one of the things I love about Feeding Hands is Lois is an accountant. Lois is a dynamite on execution, day-to-day execution, and she has a vision of where she's going with the ministry. So that would be my number one thing on volunteer things, is that they're many times not run very well. And church things are not always run very efficiently or very well. People get off in the weeds, and there isn't a clear, there's a discipline of solving problems, and a discipline of whether you're designing products or designing something that's going to help people. And you need to have structure and discipline if you're going to achieve humanitarian goals. Sounds contradictory, but so that's my experience. It's not always very well. The execution isn't always what it should be.
How do you strike the balance between those two, that sort of idealism and also execution?
I think that we need, and this will sound wrong, I shouldn't say this sound wrong, but people that have business experience need to be involved need to be partnered and on the team when you're going to do a humanitarian project. And so they need to have faith that's just as strong as the rest of people on the team, so they can be team members. So So that's the challenge. So bringing people in, I run a board in the church, and we have all kinds. I run the board that does all the facilities, and I have the facility board is a ministry of the church, and I have a whole bunch of people that are believers that are also very good at physically managing the facility. So that's a ministry in itself. So I would say you need to get the right skill set. And it's the same as doing a corporate project. If you do a I'm corporate and I'm religious. I mean, if you do a corporate project, I would, if I had to do an engineering team, I built hundreds and hundreds of engineering teams over the years. I have to have the right mix of skills of people and good chemistry between the people that are going to work together, and a clear goal of what they're going to do, and a clear boundaries of what they can't go beyond that are not either due to corporate or cost or whatever. What are those boundaries? And doing work for God is the same. Why would God expect us to do sloppy work for Him, and yet we're doing great work for AT&T? It makes no sense.
So what traits do you think make a good leader?
I think a good leader first is a good people person. Good leader is someone who spends time with people and understands how they think and how they work and has a good model. A good leader is compassionate. A good leader is one that works to develop people so they can reach their maximum potential. So there is a coach. So the model of being a leader of a engineering team is to be the coach of the team, not the doer of the team. And so I coached I built high-performance teams, and I attracted top engineers. So if you have top engineers, you're in good shape. And then in turn, though, my loyalty to them is that I helped the career-wise. I got put development assignments, development projects, training, and got a lot of them promoted, and got a lot of them so that they could take more and more responsibility in the company. So I probably focused 50 or 60% of my time on the people that work for me, not my boss's bosses or any of that stuff. And I was never aspired to the corner office. I didn't want to become a vice president and go mucking around in all these conference rooms and corporate jets. I wanted to be with my engineers in the field, face to face, solving problems. So your goal, your purpose of being there as a leader of a team is to be the support. You're in support role, actually. Ironically, you're called the leader and you're on the top of the organization chart, but your real goal is to support the people so that they can do a dynamite job. So that was my approach, and it worked pretty well over the years.
So what's been one of the most powerful or surprising moments that you've witnessed during a build or service project?
I would say that I don't really have a pivotal moment. I mean, I've had a lot of things where something specific happened and it was emotional to me. But I think I have just been amazed at the dedication of people. If you get a group of people together and they share a common goal, and I'm amazed at the performance that a group of people do. So that's I don't know if it should be surprising, but that's always surprising to me. People working at 0 degrees to get the siding on a house because they know there's a family needs to move in when we're doing habitat. And we were working on a house once, and I were waiting for an inspector, myself and another habitat person, and we were doing some project, and there was a young guy in his 20s on a bulldozer. We were backfilling around the house, because you dig when you do the foundation, you push the soil back so that you can put a ladder up and scaffolding and work. And so he was there, and he was in his 20s, and he has his earbuds in, and he was listening to who knows, something. And so he said, he was stopped for a minute, and he saw the two of us standing there by the house working on something. And he said, "How much are you guys getting paid?" And this was at 6:30. He says, you have overtime, right? You're getting overtime for this. And we said, "For volunteers." He said, "No, you couldn't possibly be volunteers, right? I mean, you're on overtime." So he couldn't accept the fact that he didn't understand the concept of being a volunteer. So I've worked with so many volunteers closely for so many years that have done some amazing things and demonstrated amazing commitment to the people we're serving, then I'm always blown away by that.
Do you think our generation has been less connected to volunteer work?
Unless it's for like college, to apply for colleges.
Exactly, or you're getting paid, or
you're gonna get an award.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something. This is a perception of mine, and I don't want to lay this perception on you because I don't have enough data to really do this very well. So this is just a guess on my part. But I'm wondering how much hands-on people are doing. Hands-on is so important. So it's one thing to read about something, it's one thing to learn about something, but when I was 16 years old and I was tuning up a 350 V8 in a Chevrolet, I was touching it and working with it. And when I was when I did physics, there was a machine shop, and it was set there idle. Everyone was studying the textbooks and I went down to the machine shop and I learned how to do milling and how to do lathe, and I built all kinds of models out of metal in the machine shop. So I think I wonder, I'll say this, if it's not for credit or not something else, but just for the joy of physically learning a skill like working with metal or siding or whatever it is, whatever that is, playing the guitar, whatever that is, I just wonder if there's enough time spent or too much of it is spent socializing. But maybe that's a prejudice on my part from my age. I don't know.
Well, I'm just wondering, what is your opinion on people who volunteer to just say that they volunteered versus the person that's there because they genuinely want to see progress and help other people? And I also wanted to ask you, what would you say to the people that say if they see a homeless person, they're like, oh, they're there because they want to be there because they made those decisions in life? What would you say to people like that? Sorry, I threw two questions at you. So.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I would say first, if you're a person of faith and if you look at someone like that, you can say, well, I have pity and I have emotion and I feel bad about it. You would feel some emotional, but that's a human thing, just to feel an emotional connection to someone that's in distress. You should feel that, and if you're not feeling that, then you need help, right? You're not a human. But then the next thing is if you're a person, you would say, all right, what can I do in this situation? What's realistic to do without invading their space and without but is there anything I can do either in the moment or anything I can do over time to make that situation better? And that would be an important priority to you, to see what's possible to do to alleviate that situation. And if you simply take the shortcut of labeling somebody or labeling a situation and discarding it, then that's a real problem. You really are. You need to. You're not contributing to society. I don't know how. You're certainly going back to your question about moral character, back to Benjamin Franklin. What are the important imperatives of moral character for the society to work? And it's to not do that, right? It's to just walk past things like that and not feel a compulsion to do something about it, and feel a responsibility to the fellow person and to understand the humanity of that person. So I'm not condemning the person that does that, but I'm not very enthusiastic about them either. There's a lot they could learn, and a lot they could. And the other part of that is if they do that with somebody that's a stranger, then you wonder what they're doing with family and with intimate friends and with other things. Are they? So this could be pretty. Again, as Stephen Minister, I've seen all kinds of things. So if that's how you live and you don't have integrity, that goes back to integrity. You don't have integrity. Your view of yourself and your relationship with other people is flawed, and that's certainly a flaw. Then you've set yourself up. You're going to have a tough life. You might feel your children, your spouse, your family. You might take the same attitude towards them.
Yeah.
I'm going to label them, and what happens is we see the wreckage. Someone comes to me and they're 55, 65 years old, and they've been doing that for 20 years. They're a wreck. Yeah. Their life is awful.
Like, is there a balance between like helping and then like not helping?
Well, and like another example is government welfare programs. A lot of people feel like it's not their responsibility to pay into taxes or whatever else it may be to help someone who can help themselves or are taking advantage of the program.
But I guess this goes to my personal political view. I mean, you need a safety net. There's people that are not capable, don't have the means to. So as a society, there's some obligation to provide some degree of support to people. And I'll tell you, I had this happen today in the Feeding Hands food line. There was a guy that came through. He's come through every once in a while. He looks like Santa Claus. And I know he's got a medal, one of his legs, and I don't know what the history there is, how he got that. But he come through, and usually he's kind of cheery. And I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm super stressed." He says, "I'm going out of my mind." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, my wife is disabled, and I'm disabled, and this government cutback that's happening. I am on Eliquis, and I'm on a couple other drugs that are important for me, and my wife's on a drug, and they're gonna. It was a $10 or $20 copay or whatever he was on, and he said they're canceling that program, and it's $500. And he says I've got $100 right now. My net assets are $100. So, and he was stressed out of his mind. And I said, well, we have people, you next time you come, we have people from the state of New Jersey on government program. We have people that are there sometimes that are counselors in the front. Mm-hmm. And then you need to hook up with one of those people, and we can get you to hook up to see if there's any options for you. But so you take this guy and his wife, and he said, they tell me I need to go back, my wife needs to go back to work. She has serious medical problems, and she's 63 years old. I mean, how many greeters do they need at Walmart, he said. I mean, so there are people that really are in tough, and I think we do have an obligation to support those people and help them. Now, the problem is, you say, all right, some people might have used that, okay? So, and then what happens is, if you say, all right, I'm going to prevent anyone from ever abusing it, then you end up with such a big bureaucracy and so many forms and so many inspectors that you kill the, you know what I mean? So there's got to be some kind of a reasonable compromise. My feeling, enough of a safety net for people like he and his wife, so that they can survive, get basic drugs they need to survive. So what I think you should do, I think what you should do is when you run a program like that, and this is again not the way the government works, but I think you should actually gather some data. You should do a spot inspection and see, and say if you have 3% fraud, then it's completely, you know what I mean? You should have it's just like anything else. You should say if 3 or 4% fraud, I can't afford to correct. The correction would be so onerous on the people that need it if I tried to make it too complicated, and it would be so expensive to spend all that money, that's an acceptable. We do that in industry all the time, right? You've got something, and you have an error rate, you have a discard rate when you manufacture of 3%, and you say that's okay, right? I mean,
yeah, and I think there are people that genuinely need these programs.
Oh my God!
And
yes.
Some people also think it's like enabling,
incentivizing people.
Yes, to stay at home. Like, oh, I have my government.
Yeah, why would you?
Yeah, I get checks from the government. I don't need to get up and work.
What would you say to that?
I don't think if you look at people that are in those circumstances, I don't think anyone would choose to be in those circumstances if they had any other option at all. Oh my God, the immigration system.
Well, I'm sure you've had a lot of first-hand experience working at places that
especially Feeding Hands with ICE.
Well, we think we're concerned because we've seen, as ICE enforcement has stepped up, we're seeing people that are not coming. And because we don't check, so we see people not coming. So imagine they're afraid, they're cooped up, they can't get food. What kind of society is that?
Yeah.
So I think we're going through a tough period right now in this country, and I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic that we'll get past this. But there's people that are here's what I think. I think there's a lot of people that are frightened, and don't feel they don't have control over their life, and so they want to make other people equally miserable. There's a lot of equally miserable or get angry, and so they want retribution on other people. People can be mean. People can have very behavior and attitudes. So and there's a lot of politicians that are building their base on grudges and on demonizing groups of people. So that's. I mean, democracy isn't perfect, and we're going through a bad period right now. Now, I took a history series a few years ago with a history professor from Drew University. We covered different periods of American history, and he would tell you that the very worst period of American history, far worse than we are now, would be right before the Civil War, 1860s, and. At that point we had slave and not slave, and we had huge division, and ultimately we went to war and killed 300,000 plus people. So that was pretty bad. So I mean, we were going through a bad period now, but it's been worse.
Yeah.
And we just did a renovation of the sanctuary. We spent $500,000 to our 1869 sanctuary, and I'm the board that does this stuff. So we renovated it, and it's beautiful. It was needed cool. Renovation, and so I arranged to have a rededication ceremony. So the original dedication was an 1869 building. So we sang the hymn that they sang in 1869, and we did this ceremony. And I gave the presentation to the congregation about what this was, and I said, here's what I want you to think about. These people in 1869 built this church for 300 people when they all had 100 members, and they had just gone through the most divisive. 300,000 people had lost their lives, 300,000 plus in the Civil War, and they had the optimism to build this building for 300 worshipers at that point in time. I said, think about that. We need the same optimism. That was my point to them going forward. Things are bad, but we have the ability to correct and get better.
How do we correct them and get better? How do we correct? I mean, there's a ton of division right now in our country. What's the solution?
Oh, I think people get tired of this. I think people will, the extremism and all of this. I mean, when I was younger, there was the McCarthy era. Huh. And the McCarthy era ruined a tremendous number of people's careers and lives. Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin, who accused him of being communist and destroyed a lot of lives. Eventually, Senator McCarthy got ridden out of there, and everybody that was aligned with Senator McCarthy tried as fast as they could to ditch Senator McCarthy and have nothing to do with him. So I do believe we'll go through a corrective process, and we will get back to reasonable norms, because we've done it before. We've gone off the rails before, and we've come back. So I'm confident in that.
So how do you think we can inspire younger generations to get involved in hands-on service?
I think mentorship. I think having intergenerational mentorship and project and experiences. I'm thrilled at Feeding Hands. If you look at today, when I was there today, half of the volunteers were high school or college age. A lot of them high school age or even some grade school age. So we had a whole mix of people, and some of them are the children of the volunteers, and they're bringing their next generation along. So I think this experience of working as a volunteer, starting when you're young, I mean, I certainly didn't. I was an atheist all those years. I didn't start until I was in my 20s. But I could have, if I'd had a parent like some of these parents that I'm envious of some of these parents in Feeding Hands. If I had a parent like that, I could have been involved in these things when I was 15 years old. So I think that's how people need to see, just like I saw by example when I worked with my in-laws, and really went radically from where I was to where I started on the path I'm on today. I think it's got to be people have to serve together, intergenerational projects together. And I did a few of those when I was first in the church. We went to Appalachia and did Appalachia home repairs with teenagers and adults, and that's probably for some of them that was a big experience for them and tipped the balance.
So I guess going off of that, what lessons would you want to pass on to your family about the value of service?
Or just younger generation?
Yes, younger generation.
Well, I was gonna say one more thing. So when people ask me about my faith, I tell them I'm a practicing Christian. And they look at me funny like that, a practicing Christian. Practicing Christian the same way as a practicing attorney or a practicing doctor. In the sense that they went to school. If you're a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, you go to school and you learn this stuff. But then you go out, and the only way you become really good at what you do is you practice. You apply that knowledge and you use that. So there's some scripture that says faith without works is dead. So I think that as a practicing, I feel I'm not a theologian, or I'm not the theory. I'm not the research chemist. I'm the guy that's cranking it out. And so for me, an important encourager and an important part of faith is by living faith and serving other people. That really is, to me, that's the most important. That's one of the most important. You need to be faithful to the faith tradition and all of that. But service, the starting point is service. And we learned in some cases, if you want a behavioral change in someone, you always assume that you start and change their mind and logic to convince them, and then their behavior changes. But an interesting thing happens. If somebody starts behaving, starts volunteering, or their heart changes. It changes them too. It's you can go from the bottom up and change. It doesn't always have to be head down. You can start from hands and feet and change their heart. So I think this thing of serving and volunteering transforms people. It certainly transformed me, and I think that's how I got on my path. And I think if we can get people that will start volunteering. So what I would say to someone young that was ready to have a change in life, or interested in a change, struggling for identity or struggling for purpose or struggling what they're doing, go and don't just do a day of caring or some piddly thing like that. Go to the food bank, or go to Habitat, or go to some other service organization and volunteer for a year or two, or whatever you need, and find somebody find a friend that's in a faith tradition. I don't care what faith tradition it is. Find somebody that can start you down that path of bringing faith into your life. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to do something where you have someone I'm suddenly transformed to a new person or anything like that. But start on the path. It's slow. It's like if you're going to learn to play tennis. I mean, you can read a book about playing tennis, you can watch a video, but you'll never learn to play tennis unless you get out there and play. I mean, and practice. So That's why I say a practicing Christian is somebody that's out there in the field serving other people and doing it. So
I love what you said. That's like a central idea in Chabad Judaism philosophy, is that first you do the deed, you feel the joy of doing it, and then you nurture it with reason and logic to keep on doing it.
Right.
So first you just get out there and do it, and you feel what it feels like to do it, and then you go on.
Right. It's an important principle.
Well, thank you so much for
Great.
coming.
Glad to be here. I knew we'd have an interesting conversation.
That was awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and stay tuned for some more episodes. Also, visit our website at therepublicwekeep.com.